Now let us start the first class, our first lecture of manuscriptology. We start with, manuscript is something which is written, but for that written thing, we must be aware of some language in which it is written, right? So what is language? The study of manuscriptology involves so many other factors. It's not only the handwritten manuscript or a lekha which you are studying and you are contemplating upon, It involves so many other factors. For example, it starts with the science of writing, the science and history of writing. What do you write? You write a language. What is a language? A language which is known to the speaker and the listener. If I speak in some Greek and Latin and if you don't know, then there is no communication. Is it not? So the language should be such which is in which the speaker is very expert. He can intelligently speak in that, and the taker should be able to take the inputs. Basically, the language is something which is spoken, right? When it becomes written language, then comes the part of manuscript. Until then, it is only Shruti. And therefore, the entire Vedic literature, as you know, is called a Shruti. Why? Because it was not written down. It was imparted by a guru to his pupils. His pupils in turn ran a Gurukula and they imparted to their disciples. So, this went on percolating generation after generation. And therefore, it becomes a Shruti, okay? But so basically it's a language, natural language, developed oral languages, and writing systems have usually been crafted or adapted as ways of representing the spoken language. Some medium you choose, okay, to represent what you speak, and that becomes a written language as such. The rules for doing this tend to become standardized for a given language, leading to the development of an orthography that is generally considered to be correct. If you know of Roman script, then you have to write A, B, C, D in a particular manner. You can't write in the way which you like it, okay? So this is supposedly a correct way, correct manner of representing the spoken language or the phonemes. What you write is a grapheme and what you speak is a phoneme. Phoneme is a unit of uchcharana and grapheme is a unit of writing. Okay, so if these two terms you are conversant with, then the rest of the things becomes very clear. Therefore, we come to graphology as such. I hurriedly mentioned a few things of this. I can leave the presentation with Ranaji. Later on you may copy it. I don't have any patenting on this. I don't patent this knowledge. Knowledge is for dissemination. So, don't waste your time in writing down. Between the lines, whatever I say, if you want to note down, it's okay. But these points you will get for sure. Ranaji? Okay. So, it is also known as orthography, graphology or orthography. Orthos is straight or correct. Orthos is straight or correct, and grapheme is to write, and therefore what is a correct writing, supposedly correct, okay, that is graphology. Orthography is largely concerned with matters of spelling and in particular the relationship between phonemes and graphemes in a language. So the orthography of Roman script will be different, orthography of Devanagari would be different, orthography of Grantha, Telugu and Brahmi all would be different, okay. Orthographic units such as letters of an alphabet are technically called graphemes. These are a type of abstraction analogous to the phonemes of spoken language. These are some definitions which have been taken from so many lexicons and dictionaries. This is not my knowledge. These are the definitions, so to say, of these terms. Now writing is graphite, a soft black substance of carbon used in pencils. Graphite pencil we use, that's a writing material. Graffiti on the walls, you write something, that's called graffiti. So many words, calligraphy and all that. I did mention all this. Then in calligraphy there is a separate type. This presentation was very old. I revised it yesterday and now today also I inserted few slides just now. But this was The Week magazine, The Week weekly I mean, June 17, 2012, page number 22. There is a special type of calligraphy called Tugrakari. Tugrakari, it has come from the Mughal influence. Tugrakari from the Mughal influence. Because Persian and Farsi, I mean these languages, Semitic languages from right to left, they are very calligraphic in a way, right? And therefore a special calligraphy has been evolved called Tugrakari. A graphologist is a person who can read your personality through your handwriting. Okay. Now types of writings. The writing systems on which orthographies are based can be divided into a number of types depending upon what type of unit each symbol serves to represent. The principal types of writing are, you know, when you go to, mostly all of you have done the preliminary course in manuscriptology. So the history of writing part you have done, the pictograph, the ideogram and the syllabary and alphabet and all that. So you know the differences in all that. What is syllabary, what is alphabet, what is pictogram, what is ideogram and all that, you know, okay. So logography, which logo, like we have the company's logos, the logo itself speaks of some word. Logo doesn't remain just a picture, it's an advanced form of pictography. Logography becomes an advanced form of pictography. So the moment you see the symbol, you acknowledge or you identify, you visualize the word which it stands for, the company which it stands for, okay. So that is basically the symbol which represents some words. Then syllabic, which symbols representing some syllable, that's only a varna. And alphabet is a complete unit, a complete element. Alpha and beta, from that alphabets has derived. Orthographies that use alphabets and syllabaries are based on the principle that the written symbols, the graphemes, correspond to the phonemes. There is this alikhita sort of niyama, unwritten rule, that whatever you write has to correspond to whatever you utter, whatever you articulate. So the you know, why the is written like that? It's something like a visual representation of the audible sound. What is grapheme after all? And when we say grapheme and phoneme, they have to be they have to be coherently connected. That means whatever visually you see as a picture, that is a representation of the audible sound, okay. So corresponds to the units of sound of the spoken language. All ancient writings come under paleography. As I said, paleos is old, very ancient. In fact, we have the paleo channels. Have you heard of paleo channels? When Saraswati river was rediscovered, you know, how the Saraswati river was rediscovered, and we say that Sindhu Saraswati civilization, it's not that the Harappan civilization was destroyed by the migrant Aryans and all that. Now the theories have changed, if you are aware of that, and this becomes a Saraswati Sindhu joint civilization, and Saraswati is still flowing from the paleo channels, you know, from the submerged subterranean channels. They are revived now, and I myself have visited Kurukshetra. If there is anybody from Kurukshetra, the Brahma Sarovara and all that. So many paleo channels have been rediscovered and revived now, and at places there are Saraswati Tirthas throughout till the Rajasthan Prabhasapattana, okay. So paleo is ancient, most ancient. Now AP, we have in paleography there are many subunits. I said paleography is like an umbrella title, I told you. Manuscript forms a part of that. Epigraphy is another part of that. Apis is upon. Apis is upon, on, above. So something you write above something, upon the rocks. Therefore, epigraphy are basically the Shilalekhas, the rock inscriptions and all that. Then epigraph is upon, writing on rock, etc. Inscription is inscribe, like copper plate, for example. You scribe in that. On the rock you write or chisel out on the rock, okay. And here in the copper plate you write, or the Ishtika Lekha, in the Ishtika, the brick writing. So inscription, epigraph, these are the words. You separate the prepositions, the upasargas and the roots. I mean, all languages are similar, like, you know, what is that? Anarthaka upasargaha. Na nirbadha upasarga arthan nirahuhu iti gargyaha. In Nirukta, there is another controversy anyhow. Then comes glyph, that is carving, and the verb glyphen, to hollow out, to engrave or to carve, that is the meaning of glyph. In archaeology, a glyph is a carved or inscribed symbol. Glyph becomes an inscribed symbol. It may be a pictogram or ideogram or part of a writing system such as a syllable or a logogram. The glyph could be a pictogram, an ideogram, a logogram, or just a syllable. Now these, when they are denoting some religious fundamental principles to you, or some religious symbols are conveyed to you, then they are called hieroglyphs. Hiero is sacred. So hieroglyphs is another such variety where something written you can find. These are some of the old, what you can say, the Harappan hieroglyphs. Why to show you the Egyptian? The moment you write hieroglyph, the Google chart, the Google Baba will give you all Egyptian hieroglyphs only. You have to search for Harappan hieroglyphs. Okay, so these are certain, see, there are certain letters also here. Anyhow, there are certain letters here, if you can see, something is engraved here, like here. There are certain letters above also. Here also some letter is there. Otherwise there is a pictogram. They are pictures. But there are some letters, the syllables or the alphabets also. And a lot of effort has gone into, you know, in deciphering the Harappan script. What does the fish stand for? There is a fish there. Then, you know, there are so many symbols. The chakra is there. So many symbols. If you just see Harappan symbols, there are so many with some letters also engraved into that. So these are the hieroglyphs. Now we come to paleography. Here I think the pictures, the pictogram and the logo is quite clear. Is an important field of Indological research. In Indology, I met this student Swasti, and she is doing research on manuscriptology and done paleography course also. So I am very happy to know that there are young students, you know, doing some research in this branch of Indology called paleography. So Harappan says the earliest documents not yet deciphered fully pose a challenge to the researchers. Dr. S.R. Rao, you might have heard of his name. Mayank Vahia, I have met him. He was in TIFR in Mumbai, so I have met him in person. So they have contributed a lot to this field, and young scientists have a bright future in this area, okay, like you. Now this is again a good example of writing on a stamba. The rock edicts of Ashoka at Girnar, Kalsi, Dhauli, Sopara is near Bombay, near Thane. It is called Nala Sopara now, or Nalla Sopara. It is Sopara, Shurparaka. That was a harbor called Shurparaka. So they give, you know, a clear picture of the then prevalent society during those times. Study of inscriptions give details of political, sociological, educational, philosophical, ritual aspects and as such attracts large number of students in these areas to take up further research. One particular inscription could be studied from various points of views. Okay, for example, the Girnar rock inscription. It could be studied to trace the development of Brahmi, you know, the earlier phase of Brahmi, then the eastern phase of Brahmi, the post-Ashoka, post-Mauryan. So, like that, one phase, okay, one dimension to that. The same inscription could be studied as the political career of Ashoka. The political background is there. Then the sociological aspect. If there are, see, in many of the Ashokan inscriptions, it starts with Devanam Piya, Piyadasi Asoka and all that. That is how the inscriptions start. And many times there is Ahimsa principle, you know, the Pashus should not be killed and no injury to be done to any animals or birds and all that. So all types of injuries are banned in his capital. So that also, you know, it's what you can say, the transformation of the king who fought so many battles, who killed so many people, and how he came. I mean, this is very interesting. So there are so many dimensions, I mean, to one particular manuscript, one particular inscription. If you are studying, it could be studied from various dimensions like this. So this is really very important. Then we come to manuscript. From paleography we come to manuscript, and then we go to why we should study manuscripts. What is the need? That itself underlines the importance of manuscriptology, right? So manus is hand, script is written. I think everybody told you the same thing. There are various types of manuscripts, various types of scripts, right from Nevari, Grantha, Telugu, Brahmi, Bengali, Uriya, Nandinagari, Kutila, Sakala, so many scripts are there. And content is also varied. So from various aspects and from various scripts, sometimes they are in various languages. Sometimes it's a mixed language, Malayalam plus Sanskrit, and written in Grantha. So three things you have to learn. You have to learn Grantha script, you have to know Sanskrit, you have to know Malayalam. Okay. So that you know enhances your proficiency in so many other fields. Now important topics, I mentioned a few in the keynote, of course. Some important topics which are involved, you know, in the study of manuscriptology. History of writing, basically we start with that only, history of writing. Then scripts, their history and development, how the scripts evolve. For example, I did a workshop 5 years ago in Mumbai University on Sharada script, and that was initiated by one veterinary doctor from Delhi. He belongs to Millennium India Foundation Trust, Dr. Uday Kakru, very good. Now, I didn't know him. Who was Uday Kakru? I didn't know 5 years back. He saw my name on the net while he was searching for Sharada. He came to know that in Mumbai University, Sharada is taught. And Mumbai University Sanskrit department, then Gauri Maulikar, the head, he got the profile. He called me one morning. I am Uday Kakru from Delhi, and you are teaching Sharada. I would like to do a workshop with you. See, from where? We don't know the people, and people out of their own interest, they come to you. And we had such a wonderful 7 days workshop, and that time one Shashi Shekhar Toshkhani, yeah, so he came to teach us Sharada script before teaching the script. Why I said? Because script, history and evolution of script, how Sharada evolved, and he spoke so passionately. I have invited him for my seminar now. In December he is coming here. So I was so thrilled, you know, a person speaking so passionately about the script of Kashmir, Sharada, and that Kashmir where he hasn't stepped after 22 and 25 years of his life. He is away staying in Delhi, but he is so attached to that. And when he speaks of Sharada, Namaste Sharade Devi Kashmir Puravasini, Tvamaham Prarthaye Nityam Vidyadanancha Dehi, may we have been praying. This is Shankaracharya praying to Sharada Saraswati. But this Sharada Peetha and that Sharada script evolved, and that evolution involves a lot, much content of that evolved from Kashmir Shaivism. When he brought out that, this was like exploring the thing, and you peel off one layer, then another layer you peel off, and then in the core you can reach then. So he was peeling off the outer layers and disclosing the inner core, of that script. So such a wonderful passion. So it's not just a script that there is a script and these are the alphabets and you have to learn it and practice it. It's not only that. There is lot much behind that script. So the history and evolution of the script is also equally important, because that is associated with the history and development and evolution of that region. It's a regional development which affects the lipi development as well. Okay. So then the scribes, their errors. Yes, somebody said something? Scribes and their errors. What are the nature, what are the qualities of a good scribe? How a scribe should not be. Uktam na likhati, duruktam likhati, etc., etc. There are so many. This is a separate topic altogether. Scribe, his errors and all that. And the sociology and economics, the dimensions of this. Then types of manuscripts. So many types are there, like Shunda Pustaka, Mushti Pustaka, and so many, Dvipatha, Tripatha, Panchapatha, like so many types are there. Then textual criticism. Illustrated manuscript, by the way, is one such very important topic. Recently I worked in Mumbai, while I was in Mumbai 3 years back. I was working under one Dorabji Tata fellowship, and I worked on a manuscript called Madhumalati. It belongs to Rajasthan, by the way. And it's a beautifully illustrated manuscript. All Rajasthani miniature paintings are there. And many folios. There was a huge, large manuscript in the Heras Institute of St. Xavier's College, Mumbai. Heras Institute. And they had preserved it under the showcase, under the glass cupboard and all that. And they gave me the scanned copy, because it is not translated into English. I translated into English. It is yet to be published. From their side something is lacking, but then it is yet to be published, but it was fun. And the pictorial study and the pictorial and cultural study of those pictures was done by one Dr. Manjiri Thakur. She is an art historian staying in Mumbai. So it was a combined venture for her as well as me. She started working on it much earlier. I worked only for a year on that, but it was fun. It's written in Maithili. The script is Devanagari. And the language is mixed, Sometimes it is Sanskrit. There are some verses in Sanskrit. Sometimes it is some words from Ardhamagadi, some from Bhojpuri, like the colloquial, the bolis of Hindi. There are so many colloquials of Hindi Pramana Bhasha, Hindi standard language, और खड़ी बोली जिसको बोलते हैं ना, उसकी बोलियाँ हैं छोटी छोटी अलग अलग. तो it was really fun. So illustrated manuscript. Then textual criticism or critical edition of manuscripts, that is one area. Collection and collation of manuscript. We had various manuscript libraries. We know only of Nalanda and Takshashila, but there are many more. Even now, Khuda Bakhsh library is there. Just now I was referring to somebody, Pondicherry person. French Institute of Pondicherry. They host thousands of manuscripts, and mostly on Shaivagamas. And I told him that they have digitized all those manuscripts, and the CD-ROMs are sold by the name Parampara. So those who are interested can see for that. So collation and collection of manuscript, that's also a big task. Then manuscript libraries, I said, preservation, conservation and cataloging, strictly in the realm of library science. But then I had a UGC's major research project on digital preservation of palm leaf manuscripts in Mumbai University, Rajabai Tower building, in Mumbai University Library. So it was 22 lakhs, 25 lakhs project for 5 years, and I completed that. And that was the first time, I think, in the history of Mumbai University Library that the manuscripts were taken out from the cupboard. And I mean the palm leaf manuscript. The paper manuscripts, Dr. Velankar and many others have worked on paper manuscript. But palm leaf manuscripts, they were tied in a red cloth and the bundles were lying in the dust. The cupboards were not dusted. Leave apart the manuscripts. So that was the first time in the sesquicentennial year, 158th year of Mumbai University, when APJ Abdul Kalam had come to inaugurate that ceremony. So it was a wonderful thing for me also when I went there once, and when he came, Abdul Kalam ji came, there was a display of some rare books, archives and manuscripts, and one very what you can say, very long manuscript was displayed. That palm leaf manuscript, it measured 2.5 feet, almost 3 feet, and it was written in Devanagari script. It belongs to some 13th or 14th century, not very old, but very beautifully written, very legible handwriting. The language was Sanskrit and Ardhamagadi. Fortunately for my MA, I had studied Ardhamagadi, so I could at least decipher the first, the Namana, the Stavana and the Kolafan, and give the description at least, because they wanted to display that. And that was on the Jain Agama Sutras. I mean, some such thing, which we never think of, unpredictable thing like, you come to discover. It is all covered, you discover it and you say, oh, something I got, eureka, like, so that's a joy. So what is a manuscript? Who can study that? Who should study that? Why, where and how? So why is the most important topic, and why one should study manuscript. Before that, how a manuscript should be treated. It's not like any other book, you just go clutch it, under your armpit and go and open it and just put it somewhere, not like that. So there is a beautiful verse, I'll read that. There are some names, Ankuralekha, Pandulekha, Mrittika, Ankuralipi, etc. Very beautiful verse this is. All of you know this? Then I can skip it. All of you know? Or shall I go through this? Sambhushyam Sadapatyavat. You have to decorate it. That manuscript also, it was in a manjusha, in a wooden casket. And the manjusha was polished and there was beautiful painting on that. So it was such a 3.5 feet, because manjusha has to be bigger, larger than the size of the manuscript. So I still have that in front of my eyes, So Sambhushyam, as you decorate your own child, ornament it and usko saja dhaja ke achhi tarah se. So sad apatyavat, like apatyavat, you have to take care of that. Parakarat rakshamcha sukshetravat, as you protect your own field, or kshetra also means wife, and therefore kshetraja and bijaja putra, kshetraja putra, etc. So kshetra also means wife. Kshetra also means a body. Idam shariram kaunteya kshetramityabhidiyate. So kshetra also means a body. As you take care of your body, as you protect your body, you protect your wife, you protect your farm. Kshetra has so many different meanings. Similarly, you have to take care of that. Parakarat, especially from getting it spoiled, malhandled, mishandled by others. Parakarat, raksham cha sukshetravat, sanshodhyam vranitangavat. Vranita angavat, if any limb, any organ, any part of your body is injured, then you have to take extra care of that, bandaging it and all that. So, like Shlatha Bandhanat, etc., Shlakshna Bandhanat, you have to take care of that. Pratidinam Viksham cha Sanmitravat. As you meet your friend and you become so happy after meeting your friend, you don't meet your friends, you don't see your friend for a day or two, and then after a week, oh, kitne din ho gaye yaar, hum mile nahi, like, gale milte hai. So you relish that. So you treat that manuscript as a good friend and look at it, even if you don't have time, don't have time to write further, you just dust it, wipe it tenderly, look at it lovingly, you know. So, pratidinam viksham cha sanmitravat, badhyam badhyavat shlatham dridhagunaihi. Like a culprit, you know, you tie him very, strongly so that he would not evade away or flee away. Similarly, that manuscript, it has to be tied very dridhagunaihi, with firm like rajju, you have to tie it, otherwise it will lose apart, you know, the folios will fall apart from the bandhana. So, badhyam badhyavashlatham dridhagunaihi smariyam harer namavad. Govinda nama sankirtana, you hari japa you do every day. Similarly, you do the japa of this manuscript. Oh, this is my child, I have to take care, I have to do this, I have to do that. So, harer namavat smariyam na evam sidati pustakam khalu. If you take care of your pustaka in this manner, na sidati, it will never perish. Who said this? Etad gurunam vachaha. Our gurus have said this. Naivam sidati pustakam khalu kadapi. Never will it cease, you know, never will it wane out or perish or get destroyed. So, this is the gurunam vachaha. Such a beautiful verse. Before writing, you take the birch bark or the palm leaf and straightway incise with the stylus. No, you can't do that. You have to have your dummy. You have to have your dummy first, and then you make this as a final version. Like in the olden days, there was dhulpati or dhulakshara, you know, the sawdust or even the mrittika, even the sand. In that you first write, and then you write on the final canvas, like that. So, Pandulekhane falake bhumau va prathamam likhet nyunadhikam tu sanshodhya paschat patre niveshayet. Nyuna adhikam, what is lacking, what is adhikam, what you have added more, which is not required. Sanshodhya, parishkaranam kritva, paschat patre niveshayet. So, that is the way of writing. This was the way of building huge temples and structures as well. In Madhya Pradesh, near Bhojpur, there is have you seen the Bhojpur Shiva temple? You have seen? So, Bhojpur Shiva temple, the lingam would have been the tallest linga. Now Somnath Ji is the tallest, but the temple never got completed. It was never finished. It was the Paramara king, Bhoja, and before building that temple, he has, you know, the architects have made a plan, a ground plan, and that is carved on the stone there, and that is preserved. That's an entire plan, you know, entire graph, and every pillar, what design should be there. So very meticulously they have pointed out everything, and that is there carved on the stone, and around that there is a fencing now, but people can go around the fence and just watch that. So that was the ground plan of the architect, and then the main temple will be built accordingly. And there is a huge ramp built. How these gopuras of, you know, 10, 12 storied or 20 storied high were built. How the stones were taken so up without cranes and all that, without any technology. There was ramps. There were ramps. And in Bhojpur, the ramp is still present. So it is incomplete, unfinished temple with all the paraphernalia, all the accessories kept there as incomplete as they were. But it's a good, what you can say, a case study, you know, of how to build temples and all that. So first you make a ground plan, nyunadhikam cha sanshodhya, paschat patre niveshayat. Now in the types of writing comes logography. Now this sign is the Nakki Lake of Abu. This is the Nakki Lake in Rajasthan, in Mount Abu. The shape of the lake is like this, and from this the State Bank of India logo came out. So the moment you see that, it's a State Bank of India. Now this is Yogakshemam, there is a motto also, but even without the motto, with these two hands, Yogakshemam Vahamyam LIC India. Okay, I mean, so the logo speaks of the words. Logo is not just a picture. Logo doesn't remain only a picture. It speaks volumes beyond the picture. So logos of companies, etc. Basically, this is the theme behind the Chinese and the Japanese languages. Every character, it's a pictographic, it's not alphabetic. Chinese script is not alphabetic, it is pictographic. So every picture stands for some word, not a letter, not an alphabet, but a word. Like when we write A, B, C, D, these are the letters or the alphabets, not the words. We have to write A, double P, L, E, then the word apple will become, it will be formed. But here one picture speaks of a word. So that exactly is the principle of logograph. Then we have the alphabetic writing or the Varnamala, and we start with the A, I, E, etc. So consists of vowels and consonants, and Devanagari and the Roman, we both have the alphabetic script. Now script is called lipi. Script is called lipi, and lipa is the verb lipa upadehe, upabruhanam vriddhihi. Upadeho nama vriddhihi, upabruhanam. That is anointing or smearing or covering with something. Like we do Sudha Lepa. Sudha Lepa is whitewash of the buildings. Sudha is whitewash, the lime, the lime wash, the whitewash. So lip plus ik, grammatically lip is the root plus ik is the pratyaya, and this becomes lipi. It is rekha samudaya rupa. Basically it means carving, engraving, covering, and then epigraph, inscription, that we have already seen. Now these are the various lekhana sadhanani. This picture is the actual picture. This is not from the net. This is the actual picture of the sadhanas which were used by our predecessor, Dr. H.D. Velankar, not H.D., Professor Hari Damodar Velankar. He was the first professor of the Sanskrit department in Mumbai University in 1963. So he has used this, and these are preserved in the Mumbai University library. So I have taken a picture of that. So Shalaka, Varnika, Lekhani, Tulika, Kurchaha, Masi Patram, Masi, Dhatu Patram, Vastram, Vastram to wipe out some ink spilling and all that. Hastidantaha for a finer thing, with the peer, the tapering end and all that. Talapatra, Bhurjapatra, Turanapatra. So many other varieties, Lekhana Sadhanani are there. These are again the Lekhana Sadhanani which he had used. The variation of scripts, this is the Brahmi, what is that? Grantha. So ancient writings were on hard surfaces like rocks, bricks with carved letters. So linear writings were in vogue. Why Brahmi developed like, a linear, and then later on when the lipis started developing, we have come to the Grantha or the Malayalam or the Kannada or the Telugu or the Tamil. All the scripts are rounded ones. Rounded ones. Basically we start with Brahma's lipi, Brahmi, and it was used for rock inscriptions. And because it was used for rock inscriptions, in the rock, cutting, chiseling out and giving a round shape is a bit difficult in a rock. On a paper it's okay, right? On a rock it will be difficult, and therefore they are more linear, like G, K, So these are the letters, like Red Cross is the K. And how that Red Cross K became gradually the K of Devanagari, gradually became the K of Kannada. I know Kannada, so this is also very interesting study. From Brahmi, how the other scripts evolved. When I went to Sri Lanka 2 years back in 2016, I spoke to them only in Sanskrit because they knew Sinhalese which I didn't know. I could speak to them in English which they knew very little. So I was speaking to them in Sanskrit department only. I was called. I stayed there for some 40 days as an overseas expert. But then they also claimed that Sinhalese is derived from Brahmi. The lipi is derived from Brahmi and the language is derived from Sanskrit. They are so firm about it. They are very firm. It's only in India that we quarrel and say, no, no, Sanskrit is not the mother of our language. We have our own antiquity, and especially the Tamilians will fight on that issue. Sanskrit has no connection with that. Tamil is older than Sanskrit. I mean, these are the things. But in Sinhala, they say Sinhalese is derived from Sanskrit and the Lipi is derived from Brahmi. So basically this is the linear one, and then gradual development brought round shapes, then letter writings on birch bark, palm leaves, handmade paper, cloth would have variations. So Brahmi also there are many variations, but basic structure is like linear. Now why we should study manuscripts? What are the contributions of manuscripts? So ancient manuscripts are storehouses of knowledge on different sciences and laws. This everybody says, but how? We'll see some examples. Deciphering various scripts of manuscripts is key to unearth this hidden treasure. So the knowledge of scripts, if you don't have, then there are the bundles of manuscript, but you don't know, you don't have the key to that. So the treasure lies untouched, undiscovered. So sometimes the scripts vary, the language remains the same. Sanskrit is the same language most of the cases. The scripts may differ. Sanskrit may be written in Devanagari, Sanskrit may be written in Malayalam, Sanskrit may be written in Grantha, Sanskrit may be written in Tamil, in Modi. So scripts may differ, but the language mostly remains Sanskrit, because Sanskrit was the language of communication not only in India but throughout, I mean the pan-India, like the Southeast Asian countries also. Southeast Asian countries, Sanskrit was the language of communication to Java, Sumatra, Yavadvipa, Suvarnadvipa and all those places. So knowledge of Sanskrit along with different scripts is the key. Who really can? Who is the adhikari? You know, whenever you are studying something, there is Anubandha Chatushtaya. 4 corners. Anubandha Chatushtaya must be fulfilled. What is the Anubandha Chatushtaya? Adhikari, Vishaya, Sambandha and Prayojana. So Vishaya is the Hastalekha, the Hastaprat. Who is the Adhikari? One who knows the script and one who knows the language. He is the real Adhikari. Bower manuscript you must have heard about. At least the name you know, Bower manuscript. Now this was unearthed in Eurasia in when? Some 400 years, written before 400 AD. So it's an old one. There are 2 bundles, one large and one small, and large divided into 6 manuscripts again. Total 7 manuscripts are there, Bower manuscripts. First 3 deal with medicine. They are in the Pothi form and bound by a string. In our library in Mumbai University, we have what you can call, say, a Xerox, not a Xerox, a scanned copy of Bower manuscript in a printed book type form, book form. So bound by a string, hole to the left, it's a birch bark, and imitation of palm leaf Pothi of South India enclosed in wooden boards. It's a Manjusha is there. So it's a well protected manuscript. The script is Brahmi of Gupta period. Normally, I mean, it's very rare that Brahmi is found on any birch bark or any, like, you know, palm leaf or something. Brahmi is found only on the rocks, but here it's an exception. So Brahmi is found on the Gupta period. Brahmi is there. The language is mixed Sanskrit, no attention to grammar at all. It's most ungrammatical Sanskrit language which is found in the Bower manuscript. There are verses in 23 meters and the favorite is Vasanta Tilaka, Tabaja Jagaga. So that is the famous, the favorite meter, Vasanta Tilaka. Part 1, I told you the first 3 parts are medicinal in nature. In the first part, it deals with a kalpa of garlic, Lashuna. The verse is, this is very good verse, I mean grammatically good verse. Atha bahuvidha madhyamamsa sarpihi यवगोधूमभुजां सुखात्मकानां अयमिह लशुनोत्सवः प्रयोज्यो हिमकाले च मधौ च माधवे च. All of you know Sanskrit? Yes. So the meaning is quite clear. Ayam Lashunotsavaha iha prayojyaha. Here is a festival of garlic to be implemented when there is the period Himakale in the winter, Madhaucha Madhavecha in the spring. Madhu and Madhava are the Chaitra and Vaishakha months. Madhu and Madhava are other names of Chaitra and Vaishakha. Like Nabho Nabhasya Shravana Bhadrapada. So Madhaucha Madhavecha. And for whom it is? Bahuvidha Madhya Mausa Sarpi Yava Godhuma Bhujam Sukhatmakanam. For the people who happily eat what? Normally, more or less they eat Madhya, Mausa, Sarpihi, that is ghee, Ghrita, then Yava, barley, Godhuma, wheat. So, those who have this as their staple food, their staple meals, they should have a festival of garlic in winter season and Madhu Madhava. Then importance of regulating digestion, that is another point. This is the Xerox of the Bauer manuscript. This is the Xerox of the same manuscript. I mean, it's not legible at all. Even from near, it's not legible. But just I took a picture and placed it here. This was the first part. Part 2 called Navanitaka. Navanitaka is butter, the cream. Navanita is a butter or cream. The cream gives selection of prescriptions of powders, various churnas, then ghritas, various types of herbal ghritas, and tailas, various types of oils, the medicated herbal oils, the medicated oils, the medicated ghrita, etc. And eye solvents, give eye solvents for cleansing the eye. So eye solvent is not a new thing. It's as old as the Bauer manuscript. It gives the eye solvents and 14 different kalpas. Like this Lashuna kalpa, there are 14 different kalpas, powders, decoctions, so many other things are there. Even the face plasters, the face mask, multani matti. Like what the girls have this, and they peel it off. Face mask, what they call? Something like that. So the face plasters are there. And collyrium, the kajjala, the surma, that's also there. And mukhalepa and anjana, that is the face plaster is mukhalepa and kajjala is anjana. So how to prepare all that? Then cough mixtures are there. So it's all medicinal in Bauer manuscript. So why you should have that? Once you lay your hand upon Bauer manuscript or something like this is one Ayurveda thing, then you learn a lot and you take pride, oh, my ancestors knew all this. That is one thing. Secondly, whatever recipes they have given, whatever preparations they have given, you can try and make the kalpas, you can try and make the ghritas and tailas accordingly. Is it not? So that helps you for the therapeutic use also. It's not only for your knowledge that you are reading it, but you can use it actually and just test it, prove it by using it. So this is Bauer manuscript. Then this is also a very famous Pythagoras example which we call, but it was Baudhayana Shulva Sutra. Pythagoras flourished in 5th century before Common Era, 5th or 6th century, and Baudhayanas is 800 before the Common Era. So Dirgha Chaturashrasya Akshnaya Rajjuhu Parshvamani Tiryangmani Cha Yat Prithak Bhute Kurutaha Tad Ubhayam Karoti. The areas produced separately by the length and breadth of a rectangle together equal the area produced by the diagonal. So the AC square is equal to AB square plus BC square. That's we have learned from the childhood mathematics. Another thing is very famous, I learned that last year Chinmay University celebrated Pi Day. Pi Day was celebrated here. So this is very, very important. I mean, this is Shilpa Sutras have first reference to pi, which gives the ratio of the circumference of circle to the diameter as 3.14 point till infinity, I mean. And the sutra is this one, Chaturadhikam Shatam Ashtagunam. Chaturadhikam Shatam, so 100 plus 4. Ashtagunam, Gunita, multiplied by 8. Dvashashtis tatha sahasranam, you add to that. Dvashashti, that is 62,000, you add to that. And Ayuta Dvaya Vishkambha, Vishkambha is divide, division. Divide it by 20,000. Ayuta, Ayuta is 10,000. Ayuta Dvaya is 20,000. You divide it by 20,000. You do the calculation. It comes to 3.1.146 something. And 3.14 is the pi, which we know of, and we learnt it in as what? Pi, yeah, I mean pi principle, but this is given in the Baudhayana. Similarly, the mathematics Ganita Kaumudi by Narayana Pandita of Kerala. Narayana Pandita of 13th century gives logistics, measures, sales and partnerships, geometry of figures, quadratic equations, and even magic squares. And this is popularly known as Kerala Math. We have a faculty, Dr. Anil Narayan, recently he finished his PhD. Dr. Anil, he is an expert in Kerala mathematics. And this is popularly known as Kerala Math, and the manuscript in Malayalam language was deciphered by Dr. K. Ramasubramanian of IIT, Mumbai. And we are fortunate to have him as a member of Board of Studies of our one of the schools, Linguistics and Literary Studies. So he is a member of LLS board. No, he is a member of our academic council, and recently 30th October I met him. So he is such a wonderful person, basically a technologist, an engineer, then coming to this part, I mean the Indology part, and did his best in, because he knows the Malayalam script, and it was written in Grantha script and Malayalam language. Grantha is the script and Malayalam is the language. This is Narayana Pandit's Ganita Kaumudi. Then Brahmagupta and Bhaskaracharya have given the value of 0 as infinity. Now everybody knows about it. Something regarding science, this is from Agastya Samhita. How old is it? It is, I don't really know. I mean, Agastya Samhita, though the name Agastya can take you far back, you know, but the exact time of the manuscript, I mean this particular composition, I don't know. I can't claim it as very ancient because I don't know it. Okay. Samsthapyam Rinmaye Patre Tamrapatram Susanskritam. Take a earthen pot. There is a translation. Place a well cleaned Susanskritam Tamrapatram Samsthapya. Place a well cleaned copper plate in an earthenware vessel. Okay. First line. Chadayet Shikhigreevena. Shikhigreeva is what? Shikhi is more, Mayura. Uski Griva. What is the color? Blue. Blue as copper sulfate. CuSO4. CuSO4. Copper sulfate. So that is called morchud. In Marathi it is called morchud because it is like more. So Shikhigreevena Chadayet. Cover it first by copper sulfate and then by ardabhihi kashtha paunsubhihi. Kashtha paunsu, kashtha is wood. Paunsu, the dust, that is the sawdust. Ardra, moist. So first you cover it with the shikhigreeva, that is the copper sulfate, and then by moist sawdust. Then dasta loshta, dasta is zinc. Nidhatavyaha parada chaditastataha. Parada is mercury. Okay, dasta is zinc. Then you put a mercury amalgamated zinc sheet. Dasta loshtaha parada chaditaha. Okay. So mercury amalgamated zinc sheet on top of the sawdust to avoid polarization. Sanyoga jayate tejaha mitra varuna saudnyatam. Because of their sanyoga, the contact will produce an energy known by the twin name of Mitra and Varuna. Mitra Varuna, basically it is the positive and the negative energy. So this is the preparation of a cell, of a battery. Okay, the positive and the negative energy, negative side. So therefore the two sides, are there from the Mrinmaya Patra. So chain of 100 jars is said to give a very effective force. And this Mitra and Varuna are called Pranavayu and Udanavayu. So this is the preparation of cell. I mean this scientific knowledge, who says that there is no science in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is only the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita and the Vedanta and the Upanishads and nothing of the empirical science. It's not like that. There are so many scientific works. Only thing is we don't know Sanskrit and we don't know how to interpret the Mitra Varuna, how to interpret the Shikhi Griva. Somebody who knows Shikhi as a Mayura and Griva as a neck, he would say cut the neck of the peacock and put it in the So, I mean this is a technical term, this is a chemical name to copper sulfate, CuSO4 24H2O. Okay, so one has to know that. There lies the adhikaritva. This is something like Tiryak Patana Yantra, Urdhva Patana Yantra we call it. So the saline water you make into pure potable water, the sea water, the saline water, the salty water, you boil it and the sediment of salt remains and then you put it on the next jar and pour. The steam would go in the next jar. You put cold water into that, it will turn into water and that will be potable water. Okay. I heard that in the Middle East, many people are doing this type of experiment on a large scale, of course, saline water converting into potable water. So 32 types of apparatus called yantras for chemical and pharmaceutical investigations in their laboratories. So this is Tiryak Patana, one such yantra. Another type of variety of science, I mean I have just picked and chosen few examples. I mean there are hundreds and thousands sciences, but I wanted to give you one from this side, one from mathematics, one from physical science like geometry, and then one from chemistry, one from this zoology. This is the equine and elephant anatomy and physiology and surgery, Shalihotra Samhita. There is Hasti Ayurveda also. There is Gaja Ayurveda or Hasti Ayurveda, Ashwa Ayurveda, and Ashwa Samhita written by Nakula. And Nakula of the Pandavas is said to be, horse tender, I mean mythologically. So on his name there is one Ashwa Samhita also. So equine is related to the horses, okay. So Shalihotra, it is 2350 BCE, but when is the Samhita written, I don't know. It's on the name of Shalihotra. The son of a Brahmin sage Hayaghosha is considered the founder of veterinary sciences. He is said to have lived in Shravasti, that is in the modern Uttar Pradesh. Shravasti is modern Uttar Pradesh. So this is the picture of that Shalihotra Samhita. This is in Devanagari script. Something related to botany. Now zoology ho gaya, abhi botany karo. Just 4 years back, I had a seminar there in animals and birds in Sanskrit literature, and that was based on again one UGC grant was there for the department as a university with potential for excellence. I had put a proposal and that was accepted, approved, and we did a seminar, a national seminar, and I published the book also, Animals and Birds in the Sanskrit literature. We took the help of Mriga Pakshi Shastram by Hamsadeva, written by Hamsadeva, a 13th century Jain monk. Can you imagine? A Jain person, a hermit, a recluse, a monk. And he has written a wonderful book called Mriga Pakshi Shastram. Mriga Pakshi Shastram. Mriga is the beast, animals, and Pakshi are the birds. So some 80 odd animals are there and some 67 birds are there. of one lion variety, Mriga, he has given some 10-12 varieties. How many types of lions are there? And why a Kesarin, a Kesari type of lion? Why he is called Kesari? Kesarin lion differs from a Simha. Simha differs from Mrigendra, something like that. I read a paper on Gaja there. So again, Gajas, there are so many varieties. And some of these varieties, they have been reflected as the characteristics of those animals in the later literature also. Bana is one such writer, Bana Bhatta is one such writer who has a keen eye like Sukshmekshika, very close observation of nature, and he has recorded many such instances. For example, in the Harshacharita only, in Harshacharita, when he describes the elephants of Tarapida, that's in Kadambari then, Tarapid ka Hastishala he describes. How beautifully he has described the elephants, like elephants have the habit of one leg, they are swinging in the air like this, one leg. 3 legs, what food they have, but 3 feet are there firmly placed on the ground, and one leg, like Krida, that is the Hastik Krida, and the Shunda, how they will wave, what is their gestation period, how many months, they carry the young ones. All these details the Jain recluse, a monk, has recorded. He stayed in a forest for many years and then he recorded, by observation he has made this. So there may be something wrong, it's not a perfect thing, but by mere observation he has recorded so many things. So it's really very interesting thing. Then this is from Mahabharata, of course. Jagdish Chandra Bose, of course, discovered that plants are sajiva, they are living creatures, okay. But then we knew it means our ancestors knew it much before that, and this is a proof, with numbers, Shanti Parva, 184 chapter, 17th verse, Sukha Dukkhayoshcha Grahanat, Chinnasya cha Virohanat, Jivam Pashyami Vrikshanam, Achaitanyam na Vidyate. There is no Achaitanya. Achaitanya, there is no loss of, absence of life in the trees. Why? Because Sukha Dukkhayoho Grahanat and Chinnasya Prarohanat, they are cut but they grow up again. So that they are conscious, they are living beings, like living creatures. And Sukha Dukkhayoho Grahanat, they also feel happy and they also have the feeling of sorrow with them. A single plant, if you plant in your balcony, if you put only one mud pot with a single plant, it doesn't grow. If you put another plant, another sapling near it, both of them, they talk to each other and they grow very nicely. That's an observation. Okay. So they also need some company. So Sukha Dukkhayoho Grahanat and Chinnasya cha Virohanat, Jivam Pashyami Vrikshanam Achaitanyam na Vidyate. And the second is Vaktrena Utpalanalena Yathordhvam Jalamadade Tatha Pavana Sanyuktaha Padaihi Pibati Padapaha. And therefore the vriksha is called Padapa. Padaihi Pibati Asau Padapaha. And the padas, the feet of the vriksha, are the roots. They are spread horizontally and vertically down, deep down the soil. They drink the water from the roots and the rootlets, the thinner one, rootlets, they are the Utpalanala. This is like the capillary action in science. Capillary action, this is Kesha Karshana, it is called. Kesha Karshanam. A small thread-like thing, and it absorbs the water and reaches to the tip of the tree, from the toe to the tip, okay. So that it reaches, otherwise how at the tip the leaf remains green and it dances in the air and all that. How you can see the life in that? It's because it drinks water and it gets the nourishment through the roots. Okay. So tat padaihi pibati padapaha. Then we come to literature and culture. Examples could be multiplied, as I said. I have taken just a few. Why we should study manuscriptology is because they provide the missing links to ancient culture. They are helpful in reconstructing our cultural, our written documentation, that heritage, they are the missing links. So once we read that, we can bridge that gap. So Chaturbhani, for example, it was unearthed in Thrissur in 1922. I have taken mostly the examples for Kerala because this camp is happening, this workshop is happening in Kerala. So Chaturbhani was unearthed in Thrissur in 1922. It depicts golden period of the Gupta age, and so we always say that Gupta age was the golden period from Chaturbhani. This is the literary evidence to prove that. This is from 5th century AD period. Chaturbhani, 5th century AD. Repository of multifarious facets of knowledge, like Sugandha Dashami Katha. There is one Sugandha Dashami Katha. It's a Jain, Jain manuscript. This is the source of the famous Cinderella story. Can you imagine? We know the story of Cinderella, and she skips that one sandal, and she is tortured by her stepmother and stepsisters and all that. But Cinderella is not the original story. Original story is Sugandha Dashami Katha. So this makes us, feel, वो सब चोर है, हमारे यहाँ से लेके जाते हैं. So it's a fine example of plagiarism on their part. Many of the Western stories, they are based on our stories. But we borrow, from them. And we say, oh, what a nice story. Anderson की story है, and this परी कथा है, fable है, ये वो है. Sanskrit was the medium of knowledge transmission, as I told you. Then lost works can be restored. These are something which are unearthed, which are lost. I mean, in Atharva Veda, Navadha Atharvanaha it is said. Okay, Sahasravartma, Samavedaha and Navadha Atharvanaha. The Paipalada and the other shakhas were there, the Jajali and all. But we don't know. We don't know of these shakhas. So, what to do? Now the Paipalada Samhita of the Atharva Veda, 450 years old, was found by Ranbir Singh of Jammu in 1875 in 250 birch barks written in Sharada script. And now in Hoshiarpur, I think in Punjab, they have done this Paipalada Samhita का प्रकाशन किया है उन्होंने. Paipalada Samhita of Atharva Veda. Reconstruction of Indian literary tradition. For example, T. Ganapati Shastri discovered the 13 plays of Bhasa. Till then, till Kalidasa's time, I mean till 1910, of course, by Kalidasa's time, we knew only Bhasa existed. There was one playwright called Bhasa, because in Malavikagnimitram, Kalidasa writes, प्रथित यशसां भास कविपुत्र सौमिल्लकादीनां प्रबन्धान् अतिक्रम्य कथं वर्तमान कवेः कालिदासस्य कृतौ परिषदो बहुमानः. And then पुराणमित्येव न साधु सर्वं न चापि काव्यं नवमित्यवद्यं. That's how Malavikagnimitram, the prologue starts. So we know of certain that Bhasa was a very prathita yasha, a poet like Kalidasa, who is amateur, who is a new poet because it is Prathama Kriti. Malavikagnimitra is the Prathama Kriti, and he pays tribute, very reverentially to Bhasa. But who was this Bhasa? Rajasekhara mentioned that Bhasa wrote Swapna Vasavadatta. That's what we know. Lavanake Vasavadatta Dagdha, what is that? Dagdha Pina Dagdha, something like, very famous quotation by Rajasekhara. So only that much we know, Swapna of Bhasa. And Kalidasa mentions Bhasa, but who was Bhasa? So till Ganapati Shastri found out a bundle of palm leaf manuscripts, And then one of them, there were 13 plays, one of the play was Swapna Vasavadattam, and because Rajashekhara had assigned Swapna to Bhasa, and therefore the other 12 were assigned to Bhasa, that is number point 1. Second point was, it's not just because all the other 12 are found along with the Swapna, they should be by the same playwright. There are some internal similarities. Every play starts with a similar tataha nandyante pravishati tatah sutradhara. Nandi is never recited in Bhasa's place. Nandyante tatah pravishati. So Nandi is sung behind the curtains. No Nandi is written to any of the plays by Bhasa. And there is Rajasimha Prashastunaha, the colophon also, the end also, Upasamhara also, like Bharatavakya. There is one particular king called Rajasimha Prashastunaha. So there are internal similarities. There are some archaic forms, ungrammatical, unpaninian forms throughout all the dramas. So internal evidences, external evidences, sabko milake, Bhasa is the playwright of all this group of 13 plays. That is how we discovered. I mean, some person discovered it. Till then we never knew who Bhasa was. So this is like reconstructing our heritage. And then we know that, nowadays there is this fashion, so to say, that what you do is uplift the villainous characters, upliftment of the villainous characters of mythology, of the epics. Now recently in the Kochi book fair, I had been to Kochi book fair last Sunday, not Parso wala nahi uske pehle. And there was this Anand Neelakanthan, again a Kerala person, mythological fiction writer. I call it fiction, he doesn't say fiction. I had invited him to Mumbai University, my department also once. And he was being interviewed in the fair, there is if you have visited the fair, then you must be knowing. Rajnikant might have visited. So on the stage he was there and some lady was interviewing him. After the interview of some 5-10 minutes, she said, if there are any questions from the audience, somebody asked something, then I raised my hand. And I asked him, you are writing like a novel called Asura for Ravana, then Vanara on Vali. Don't you feel that you are deviating from the history and you are distorting our tradition? Then he was like furious, He didn't want to take my criticism against him, and he said, no, how can you say that Valmiki's Ramayana is the original Ramayana? There were hundreds of Ramayanas. I said, hundreds of Ramayana is a book, 100 Ramayanas by Ramanuja. And Mahabharata, of course, there are so many versions, and you took only the southern and the northern, and you take a critical edition, but then there are so many versions. Then I asked him, did you find any such version before you wrote Asura and Vanara? He said no. Then that's a fiction. But he is not ready to accept that. I mean, the thing is, this is a trend, but this trend started by Bhasa. He mentioned Bhasa. There he mentioned Bhasa. I told him Bhasa wrote it as a nataka and not as a mythology, not as a itihasa. You write it as a novel, we'll accept it. If you write it as a itihasa, we won't accept it. So clear, no? So Bhasa wrote it as a nataka. In Urubhangam, he has tried to uplift Duryodhana's character. I mean, there is what you can say, a silver lining to every dark cloud, you say. No? The personalities are not just black and white, there is a grey shade as well. So that grey shade, if you want to bring out, we don't have any objection. Because after all, it's a nataka. It's not a itihasa. Valmiki can't write that. Valmiki wrote itihasa, Vyasa wrote itihasa. And these people are writing fiction. They are writing the kavyas, the natakas. So they can have their poetic licenses. But if you refuse to say that you are writing a fiction, and then you say, I am not distorting, then these two things don't go together, I told him. Anyhow, but the trend was started by Bhasa. Bhasa, you can say, is the first sort of rebellion writer and all that. And then there started a chain. After the discovery of Bhasa's dramas, then there started this, a trend like to look at the neglected or so to say villainous characters of the epics and the itihasas and try to find out or explore some good qualities or merits underlying their personality. That's a good attempt. So Bhasa was one such thing. Urubhanga he did for Duryodhana, and Karnabharam he did for Karna. And then so many other things also, like Pratima Nataka. There were so many other what you can say inventions, poetic inventions he brought out. So occurrences of common phrases and literary style, these are all taken into consideration before assigning the authorship to Bhasa. Another glaring example is that of Kautilya Arthashastra, again by Shama Shastri, Mysore of course. A manuscript was gifted to a Tambram was there, a Tamilian Brahmana from Tanjore. He gifted one manuscript which he found, to the newly founded Mysore Oriental Research Institute. There he went. There was some Christian man there, I don't remember his name. He gave it to R. Shama Shastri. R. Shama Shastri was the curator. Okay, the librarian and the curator, what is their role? So he was the curator. That person gave this manuscript bundle to R. Shama Shastri, who happened to be the curator. And he identified that as Arthashastra written by Kautilya. And then it was found in 1905. From 05 to 09, for 4 years he worked on that, and part by part, he started publishing the English translation through the Indian Antiquary and Mysore Review. And this is how by 1910 everything was finished, and therefore it is assigned to R. Shama Shastri. The discovery of Arthashastra goes to Shama Shastri. So this is again a very valuable text that was lost in oblivion and was regained because of knowledge of script and Sanskrit language. So this is the Kunjika. This is the key. Okay. History and geography. Knowing history and geography of India, various Puranas and historical works like Rajatarangini give information of Indian history and geography, which can be endorsed by the travel accounts, inscriptions and other historical records. Rajatarangini के बारे में बहुत काम हुआ है, and this was tallied with the Chinese travelers' travelogues as well. Then Puranas speak about many Puranas, the very definition of Purana is Sargascha Pratisargascha Vansho Manvantaranicha Vanshyanicharitam Chaiva Puranam Panchalakshanam. So Vanshyanicharitam Chaiva, Vanshe Bhavaha Vanshyaha, Tasya Anucharitam, biography. So that speaks of history. If you read the Puranas, you know the history of the then prevalent India. That society you know. The geography also you know, because Puranas are written in some typical geographical locations, typical regional conditions, like this Vamana Purana has Brahma Purana. Brahma Purana has the background of Maharashtra and Godavari, and therefore the origin of Godavari, Godavari, I split it, because this traces back to the Gautama Rishi, and there was a drought, and what happened? Then his cow was, grazing somewhere, so that person, that is Ganapati, and he just throws a darbha grass, at the cow. This Gautama throws the darbha grass, and the cow dies. So it is Gohatya Pataka. Then for Gohatya Pataka, what he should do? Then people tell him he is asked to do tapashcharya, austerity, and bring the celestial Ganga down to earth. That alone can wipe out his papa. So he urges, does the severe austerities and all that, and then brings the stream of Ganga, and therefore Godavari is called Dakshina Ganga. And then the cow gets revived, cow is rejuvenated, so Goda, cow ko diya usne, वापस life diya. And vari is best, good, better. I mean it's a tara bhava, taratama bhava mein tara bhava hai. So comparative degree. So go, da, vari. So that is the origin. I mean, these are the locations also. Vamana Purana revolves around the Kurukshetra, Haryana, Sonpat, Bagpat, that area. So there are many regional variations, So the history and geography, and in Puranas there are many types of danas like Gudadhenu, Tiladhenu and this and that. The Meru also, Gudameru and Tilameru, the Parvata also you have to make and give the dana. Pustaka dana is one dana. So Pustaka is not just a printed book you buy and give it, you write a manuscript and give it. So Pustaka dana is writing something from an exemplar. You take an exemplar, you copy it, and your handwritten copy you gift as a gift, to someone near and dear to you. So the Pustaka danas are also there. Then Yatha Likhita Pathaka, Rajashekhara I think refers to Yatha Likhita Pathaka, a person who reads as it is. So even if the written thing is wrong, the Pathaka will read it wrongly. A real Pathaka should do the Parishkara and read it correctly. So Yatha Likhita Pathaka, he writes contemptuously, So Yatha Likhita Pathaka, then Pathakadhama, Shadete Pathakadhamaha. So many things are there. So all this, Bana also refers to, even the bookmarks are there. Bookmark. Now we have the bookmarks, like nice quotations and all that, and a ribbon and everything to that, and keep in the book, the printed book. But in the folios, from where he has to start the next reading, Pustaka Vachaka. Pustaka Vachana was a profession. Purana Vachana. Puranika is a surname. Puranik is a surname. One who reads Purana is a Puranika. So, this was a profession. Writing and reading the Puranas or the books became a profession then. And they used to use the bookmarks, and that was Nagadanta or some Mayura Pitch or something like that. So, right. Even the Shakyanam Pujanam Karyam Chivarahara Pustakaihi. There is a quotation. For the Bauddha bhikkhus, how you should pay your respect to them. Shakyanam Pujanam Karyam Chivara Ahara Pustakaihi. Chivara, the Kashaya, Vastra, Chivara. Then Ahara, give them some food, and Pustaka, you give them Pustaka. So that is the way to treat the Atithi Puja is to be done by these three things. This is the most interesting part which I love. The Colophons always have, some enigmatic language, some code language. They won't write this manuscript was written on 13th of November 2018, like that. They won't write that. So they would that is the way of showing their scholarship, their vidvatta, and it is puzzling the commoners. Commoner won't know it. Is it not? Commoner won't understand that. What is this Shunya Veda Mahaprana Shashi Samvatsare? What is this Shashi Samvatsare? I know Vilambi Samvatsara. This is Vilambi Samvatsara, Pralambi Samvatsara, Hemalambi Samvatsara. What is this Shashi Samvatsara? This is written by the 20th century poet Parikshit Sharma. Parikshit Sharma, Parikshin Nataka Chakram, again from Kerala. Parikshit Sharma, Pandit Ogeti Parikshit Sharma has given the birth date of Rana Pratap. He has Ranayaniyam, he has written a Mahakavya called Ranayaniyam. And in that, when Rana Pratap was born, that he has given the date in an enigmatic language which is adopted by the manuscript writers. Shunya Veda Mahaprana Shashi Samvatsare Priyaha. Who can decipher that? You don't tell me. Yes? Shunya is 0. Veda is 4. 5. Shashi is 1. So? Right. Ankanam Vamato Gatihi. 1540. He was born in 1540. Even if you don't know 1540 is the birth year, you can decipher it this way. Now Lilavati, when Bhaskaracharya wrote, he wrote, Rasa Gunamaye Varshe Maya Lilavati Rachita. Rasa Gunamaye. So now that's controversy. Rasa Gunamaye Varshe. Gunas are 3. Rasas are 6. Now again, this is very important. Why rasas we are saying Shadrasa and not Navarasa? Why?
According to us, there are 8 rasas, 9 rasas.
But we are not taking 8. We are in the dilemma whether to accept 6 or 9. And why we accept 6? Tell me that. So
there is a division of the rasas according to Sattva, Rajas, Tamas,
where is the rasas and gunas combined? Katvam Lavanat Tushna Tikshna Ruksha Udaina Ahara Sat. Not only that, see, this speaks of the chronology also. When was the 9th rasa introduced? Bharata speaks of 8 rasas. Okay. When was the 9th introduced? Who introduced it? But before Mammata? Udbhata. Udbhata mentioned it. Udbhata mentioned the 9th rasa as Karuna. And Mammata just incorporated that, what is that? This one, na? Nisha, what is the sthai? Nirveda sthai bhavosti shantopi navamo rasa. Vishwanatha would say Shama is a sthai bhava and Mammata would say Nirveda as a sthai bhava. But before that, Udbhata mentioned 9th rasa. Udbhata's time is 9th century. 9 and a half, something like that. Before Mammata, just few years before Mammata. And what is the time of Bhaskaracharya of Lilavati? Much earlier. And therefore, he was not conversant with the 9th rasa. And therefore, we have to take 6 rasa. It's not because of the 6 rasas which are given in the Bhagavad Gita, but because the 9 rasa which comes to our mind, Sahitya Navarasa, the concept was unknown. So you see, this thing gives you the chronology, the historicity also. While there lies the crux, of the critical editor. When you are critically editing a particular thing, whether to take it as 6 rasa or 9 rasa, how would you decide? You have to see at the history, geography, region, this, that, so many things. And then you have to decide. You can't just make a hasty decision. Okay? Only Sahitya people would know. Shadrasas are known to everybody. That is one thing. And Udbhata was not born when Bhaskaracharya wrote this. When Bhaskaracharya wrote Lilavati, Udbhata was not born. And therefore, Shadrasas are to be taken. That means he wrote the Lilavati when he was 36. Right? Rasa Gunamaye Varshe Ankanam Vamatogati 36. So these are very interesting things. So while teaching this to the manuscriptology students, I always used to give them exercise. Give your birth year in enigmatic language. The girls won't do it. They would hesitate because their age would be known. Don't mind. Then tell me your year, birth year. Okay. One who is ready. For that you need to know what the Anka, what the Sankhya stands for. There are so many ways, Here, Shunya is written. Instead of Shunya, Kha would be used. Instead of Shunya, Kha would be used, Akasha would be used. So Akasha is Shunya, that is 0. So every time Shunya may not be used. So there are, certain words which symbolize a particular figure. So that you have, And for that you need to know the cultural fabric of India. This lies in our culture. Akasha is Shunya. Kha is another synonym. So the knowledge of Sanskrit, the knowledge of culture. Now Chaturveda, when you say Veda, Vedas are 4. Now only we people will know. All others won't know. Pancha. For Pancha it is Mahaprana. Mahaprana is Pancha. It could be Shara or Bana. Panchadhanva, or Panchashara. Panchabhuta, exactly. So from 0 if we start, 0 is Shunya or Akasha or Kha. 1, it is Shashi, it is Dhara, it is Mahi, it is Prithvi, it is only 1. So whatever only 1, even Brahma, Ekameva Advitiyam Brahma, you need to know the Vedanta philosophy for that. It's not only the culture, it's the philosophy, the history, the religion, culture, everything you need to know. Okay, so for 1, there are some other, see, these are the names which stand only 1. Then for 2, Nayana, Hasta, Pada, Paksha, the wings, or Ashwini Kumara. Ashwini Kumara, Ashvidvaya, because they always come Dvaya into. Pakshma, eyelashes, Pakshma, Nayana, anything which speaks of Vachaka of Nayana, Chakshu or anything, Lochana. So anything which comes in 2, which comes in pair, or simply Yugala or Yama. Yama is 2, twin. Yamala, okay. So for 2, all these words can be used. For 3, class is there. Okay, very good. So for 3 again, Guna, Netra. Now Netra is very misleading. It is 2 or 3. Shiva Netra. Agni. Trinachiketa, Agni. Surya. How come Surya? Agni is okay. Agni is 3. Trimurti concept is also very later. Trideva, Trimurti concept is later. Triguna is basically used, or Agni is also used. Trividha Tapa, Kaphavata Pitta, the Ayurveda. The dosha, Tridosha is old. So some such thing for Chaturashrama, Chaturvarna, Chaturveda. Veda is the most commonly used. 5 we saw. Then for 6, basically Shadrutu. Basically is Ritu. Shadrasa, Shadrasa and Shadrutu. These are the basic things. 7 there are Saptadvipamati, Dvipa is there, Saptasagara, Saptasindhu, Saptarashmi, Saptaparvata, Saptarushi, yes, Saptarushi. Saptavarna what? I didn't get that. Swara, okay. Saptaswara, yes. Then for Ashta, Ashtavasu, Ashtadik, Disha, Dikpala, Gaja, Diggaja, and Nava, Graha. Nava is basically Graha. So this is the very good exercise. So something in a lighter vein. So birth year could be told. Basically, why study Vidya? I mean, all these are the things, but Vidya Prashastya, you gain knowledge. And as a human being, as a rational human being, your attempt is to know more and more in every branch, every field. So qualities of a scribe include that he should be well acquainted with various scripts. Different scripts reflect different cultures. Interaction with people becomes easy. One becomes well versed and knowledgeable by manuscriptology study. That is Vidya Prashastya. This is one such Ayurveda manuscript. Then a quote, and I'll finish it. One of our major misfortunes is that we have lost so much of the world's ancient literature in Greece, in India and elsewhere. probably an organized search for old manuscripts in the libraries of religious institutions, monasteries and private persons would yield rich results. And therefore he says further, the critical examination of these manuscripts and where considered desirable, their publication and translation are among the many things we have to do in India when we succeed in breaking through our shackles and can function for ourselves. So such a nice wonderful manuscript is here, like fan, you know. This is on the Agaru Patra. Agaru Patra is mostly you find in Odisha and Bengal, you know, the eastern part, Agaru. So I think, yes, I am done with this. Thank you very much.